Welcome to Chapter 13. In this chapter, we're going to discuss base wage and salary systems. By the end of the chapter, you should be able to define base wages and salaries and be able to state the objective of any salaries and wage system, define job evaluation, name and briefly discuss the four basic conventional methods of job evaluation, explain the concepts of key jobs and compensable factors, differentiate between subfactors and degrees, explain the purpose of wage and salary surveys, discuss wage and salary curves, define pay grades and pay ranges, explain the concepts of broadbanding, skill-based pay, competency-based pay, market-based pay, and total rewards. Base wage and salaries. That's your pay that is received by you either hourly, weekly, or monthly. It's the form that it forms the foundation of your perception of what's fair or equitable in the pay system. There are some objectives to this wage and salary system is to establish a structure for equitable compensation of employees based on your job performance that is achieved in the level of the job. The phases of establishing pay ranges can include pricing the different jobs, determining relative worth of different jobs to the organization, and you can enumerate the requirement of a job, and that's the determination of value of each job in relation to other jobs in the organization and how it's used to design a pay structure, and you classify jobs according to this level of importance. And when you while the overriding purpose of job evaluation is to establish relative worth of jobs, it can serve several purposes. So here's the various steps. You have to gather information on the jobs being evaluated. And one second. Okay. And information is obtained from your current job descriptions that you've already outlined. If not, it's necessary to analyze jobs and create up-to-date descriptions so that you have something more current. The next step would be to identify factors or a specific factor that needs to be used in determining the worth of different jobs to the organization. And some of the frequently used factors are knowledge, responsibility, working conditions. From there, you would develop and implement a plan using the chosen factors for evaluating the relative worth of different jobs to the organization. And that should consistently place jobs requiring more of the factors at a higher level in the job hierarchy than jobs that require fewer of the factors. Figure 13.2 in your textbook gives you some of the bullet points of potential uses of job evaluations. As you can see, is to provide a basis for a simpler, more rational wage structure, to provide a base for employee performance measurements, to provide information for wage negotiations, so on and so forth. And you can look at the other bullet points. Now, we have some different methods. Job ranking method ranks your jobs in order of their difficulty from simplest to most complex. Job slotting incorporates newly created or revised jobs into the existing job hierarchy, and then job classification determines the relative worth of the job by comparing it to a predetermined scale of classes of jobs or grades of jobs. The point method is taking the job evaluation method, which is quantitative, that's numerical, and it's taking that point scale and it's used to evaluate jobs on a factor-by-factor basis. Not in general, but going by point. Selection of key jobs represents the span of responsibilities, duties, and work requirements. It's a huge pool of everything, and so it's going to represent all of it. And the goal is to represent each major internal variable in the pay structure for all the different jobs that are being evaluated. There's compensable factors, which are characteristics of jobs that the organization deems important to the extent that it's willing to pay for them, to compensate you for the job. And that determines the relative worth of the job. The job subfactor details a breakdown of a single compensable factor of a job, and then the degree statements is used to break down the job factor. So you can see how everything is broken down to the simplest form, the most minute detail. Now, point method assigns your weights to factors, so it's going to reflect the relative importance of factors, of subfactors, and of the degrees. And you're assigning points to specific jobs. So you examine the job descriptions, determine the degree statement that best describes each subfactor for each of those compensable factors. And then you add the total number of points up. And then from there, you'll be able to have a specific assigned point for that particular job. So here's a sample of certain point values in table 13.2. You see the compensable factors are skills, effort, responsibility, job conditions, and then you'll see the total possible points that could be assigned. The maximum points for skill would be 260, maximum points for effort 240, maximum points for responsibility was 360, and the maximum point for job conditions was 140. When all those maximum points were calculated, it came up to 1,000. So that was the total possible points that could be factored in. And then you go into the subfactors, right? So we have the skill. Your subfactor of skill would be job knowledge, experience, and initiative. And when you look at first, second, third, fourth, those would be assigned points per degree. So the degrees are first degree, second degree, third degree, fourth degree. And those are the levels of your subfactors are. So your job knowledge at your first degree, how many points could be assigned, second degree, so on and so forth. The next subfactor under skill would be experience, and then the other would be initiative. And then when you see where effort, is the effort a physical effort or a mental effort? And based on that, you can see how the points are assigned. Mental efforts have a higher point assigned to those subfactors. Responsibility for organizational policy, for work of others, for goodwill with customers and public, for company cash. So how responsible are you within those, and how those assigned points play into account. And then job conditions, what the working conditions and the hazards that can be involved. And you can see how those points can also be assigned. This is just a sample. So we look at the factor comparison method and uses a monetary scale for evaluating jobs on a factor-by-factor basis. So it's using money. So it could be $100, $25 an hour, whatever. It's monetary scale. And each compensable factor is ranked according to its importance in each particular job. So by assigning a rank to every key job on one factor at a time, and then the wage or salary is allocated for each job according to how those factors are ranked. Then the monetary scale is prepared for each of those factors. So it's looking at a case by case, so basically a factor by factor basis. There are some advantages and disadvantages of having these various job evaluation methods, so we're going to look at these methods and then look at the advantages and disadvantages. So under job ranking, it's very fast and easy to complete. However, it's limited to smaller organizations. You cannot do this in a huge organization with thousands and thousands of employees. Under job slotting, it's relatively cheaper, right? But, however, it produces only an ordering of jobs. It can be somewhat subjective. It's used only where there's an existing job structure. So that means it can't be used when you're doing a startup. Job classification. It's readily accepted by employees. The system lasts for years without substantial change. However, it can be abused by job evaluators, and the broad classification descriptions causes employees to question the grades in respect to the jobs that are being performed, and their jobs in particular. The point method is easy to assign monetary values to jobs. However, it requires significant interaction and decision-making by parties involved in conducting the evaluation itself. The factor comparison method is easier to develop than the point method. However, it's not easily adapted to changes in the jobs being evaluated. So if the jobs being evaluated have frequent changes or have a drastic change, it cannot easily adapt to those changes. So an organization can create or request a wage and salary survey to be distributed to employees, and it's used to collect comparative information on the policies, practices, and methods of wage payment. And they're conducted on organizations within a specific geographical area or industry. And so you can be able to find out how other organizations fare. This is also done for researchers, academics who want to be able to see how organizations in specific industries, areas, territories, how they pay their employees. So you can have a compare and contrast in a sense. There are some advantages, of course, and disadvantages. An advantage could be that it can help correct employee misconception about jobs, because if you look and see that you get paid $50,000 a year for a job, and you then see that other employees in other geographical territories are getting the same or less than you, then you see that, okay, I see that I'm getting paid fair. Also, there are ways of obtaining information by conducting your own survey and purchasing or accessing a survey that's been taken by another party. The wage salary survey can be conducted through a personal interview, which is the most reliable, but it's also the most expensive method. It can also be done by mailed questionnaires, used only to survey the jobs having a uniform meeting all over industry. The disadvantage to this, of course, is that it can be answered by someone not fully familiar with wage structure. So anyone could answer it, and that could skew the results. There's a telephone method, which is quick, but the information is usually incomplete, and it's effective if used to clarify responses of mailed questionnaires. But it can be tedious if you're just trying to use it as a general method of surveying. Internet is inexpensive and quick. A disadvantage is that all companies are not accessible via the internet. Figure 13.3 shows you some possible topics that could be presented in a wage survey, such as vacation practices, where they're paid, how often employees paid, shift differentials, pay ranges, starting wage ranges, length of workday, and if there's any unions involved, the description of the union contract. The expensive sources of purchasing or accessing wage salary surveys, and you can see right here, here's some there, and they're very expensive, where you can actually be able to gain access to these surveys. Mercer, Hewitt Associates, Towers Watson, and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Most of you have probably heard of PricewaterhouseCoopers. Some inexpensive sources would be the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the U.S. Department of Labor. You can just go online and find that. State and local governments, trade associations, and of course chambers of commerce. The most easily accessible would be the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the U.S. Department of Labor. There's various categories that are available on the internet that you can find surveys. Those conducted by the federal government, those that are conducted by professional associations, employee associations, consulting firms, and private research organizations. Now, here's how you avoid problems during wage salary surveys. Assess the participating companies for comparability. Not only should factors such as size and type of business be considered, but you have to also consider the intangibles such as prestige of the organization, security, growth, opportunity, and location. All of those are important factors. The second thing is to compare more than your base salary or wage. The total compensation package, including incentives and benefits, should be considered. For example, a company might provide few benefits but compensate for this with high base wages and salaries. So you see how you can counteract and balance it that way. The third guideline would be to consider variations in job descriptions. And the most widely acknowledged shortcoming of wage and salary surveys is that it's difficult to find jobs that are directly comparable. Usually, more information than a brief job description is needed to properly match jobs in a survey. Why? Because certain people use, or companies will use a job description that has this vague meaning, or it can be used in multiple jobs, but you need to actually be able to go deeper in order to see how much that job really is aligned with that particular position. The fourth guideline is to correlate survey data with adjustment periods. So it's asking and it's looking at how recently wages and salaries were adjusted before the survey affects the accuracy of the data. And some companies may have just made adjustments, whereas others may not. So you have to take in consideration any of those periods of adjustment. Figure 13.5 looks at the problems that you can encounter when using this data from the surveys, where the categories would be too broad or too imprecise, or imprecise, like I mentioned earlier. The industry categories could also fall into that same pit hole. The unadjusted for major benefits, so it's not making any kind of adjustments for any like really big benefits beyond the basics. So if you have some major benefits, but you're still factoring them in like basic benefits like health and dental, then you're going to have issues with how that data actually calculates. So we talked about the job categories and industry categories that can be too broad or imprecise. The same is true with our salary categories. Another thing is that your company size and type could be difficult to relate, to own it. Out of date or undated data, samples of firms, unrepresentative samples of firms too small. And that means is that when you're conducting the research and the sample size, meaning that you need to have so many organizations that provide or respond to your survey, and if your size is too small or it doesn't represent enough of that market or that geographic territory, then it's difficult to then say confidently that your data is sufficient. Two other things is that the survey can be based on unemployed individuals and or job seekers. And it could be too broad or imprecise in other ways. So these are some of the problems that you can actually encounter. Now there are some curves in wage and salary. That's a graphical depiction of the relationship between your relative worth of the job and the actual wage rates. And that's used to indicate the classes of pay and the ranges for the jobs that are being offered. So the green circle jobs are your underpaid jobs, right? And that's usually, and I don't even need to list all of the jobs and industries that you know that people are underpaid. And then the red circle jobs are the overpaid jobs. And I won't even highlight those because you can rattle off a list in your own head. So figure 13.6 shows you the wage curve using the point method. And so the point method are the dots, right? And you see right there where it's showing the wage rate on the side. That's from $10 to $14 an hour. And then the points that go from less than 100 to beyond 500, which is 600. So 0 to 600. Then our pay grades and our ranges. The grades are classes of jobs that, for pay purposes, are grouped on the basis of their worth to an organization. And then our range is how much that we permit a person to be paid with a minimum and a maximum. And it's assigned to a given pay grade. So during the pay grade of whatever level you're in the company, you'll then have a minimum and maximum wage that you will be allowed to be permitted to promote, or not promote, but provide a raise to that individual, or the minimum and maximum range in which that person can come into a particular job. Now, this is established by having a relatively large number of grades with identical rates of pay for all jobs within each grade. So basically, if your range is from 10 to 15 in 5 to 10 different jobs, then you can see that how those grades and the ranges based on levels, so frontline, mid-level, and senior. And then small number of grades with a relatively wide dollar range for each grade. So you'll have a small percentage of people with that whole jobs that have a large range. So that large range could go anywhere from, $50 to $100 an hour, right? And then pay structure ranges between the extremes. So it'll actually show you the far ends of both ends of the scale. Now, Table 13.8 establishes your wage grades. You see grades 1 through 5, and there's a point range of 0 all the way through 550. And you can see how that's broken up by grade. Then the chart here shows you the establishment of pay grades within ranges, and it's this same way. It's just giving you a different depiction from $7.25 an hour to $11 an hour, and then how that is broken up across the point scale of 0 to 600. Figure 13.8, which I will expand, shows you the development of the base wage salary structure. And you see here where it shows the compensation policies filter into the job analysis and job descriptions, which then fills into your selection of your job evaluation method, how it's evaluated, the wage survey, construction of wage curves with pay grades, and the basic wage structure. Those compensation policies are factored into that on both sides. And then you'll see, well, actually on all three sides, because then it goes down below and I'll show you this time. So the compensation policies come in from all three levels to impact this. So broadbanding is where we collapse our job clusters or the tiers of positions that we have into a few wide range bands to manage career growth and deliver pay. And these bands have minimum and maximum dollar amounts that will overlap each other. And so they're broadband. That makes sense. So you have these just a few, and they're wide, and then they just kind of overlap. And so that's how you're able to perform that function. Chapter 13 goes into greater detail about this as well. So there's some advantages and disadvantages of this practice. You have more autonomy if you're a manager in setting pay rates. It's easier to move your employees around. It encourages a lateral movement or downgrading of a flat organization. Remember, flat organizations have fewer, it has less hierarchy, it has fewer chains of command. So instead of you reporting upwards to 5, 10 people, you may only be reporting upwards to 1 to 3, for instance. This also helps improve communication teamwork. The skill-based pay is compensating employees for the skills they bring to the job. So it's looking at what you've done in the past and also what you've done, not just in the past while employed at the company, but in the past from previous work that you've performed at other companies. It could also be skills that you bring from education, so on and so forth. And so payment is then determined based on your range of your knowledge, the number of business-related skills that you have mastered over the years, the level of skills or your knowledge that you possess, and the combination of both level and range. Now, there's some concerns of skill-based pay. Increased labor cost, if you top out the number of employees, false expectations, and union agreements. And let me go ahead and be more specific, and I'll break these down. So when we talk about increased labor costs, direct labor and training costs often rise, right? They can escalate. And so they're usually offset by a reduced labor force. And so that then means you're going to lower your total labor cost. Your topped out employees are those who have nowhere else to go. They're just stuck. No, we talked about plateau, right? So you're topped out. There's nowhere else to go. And so it's not new to managers, and it arises in most organizations regardless of pay system used. And what happens is you expose the topped out employees to broader jobs in other departments. That's how you handle that. Now, false expectations occur when there's no vacancies in the job areas in which employees have been newly trained. And the key is to be realistic about current or near-term future needs of the organization. Unrealistic expectations can lead to increased turnover due to disillusioned employees. Why? Because you brought me in for a position that I can't even fill. I can't do anything with it. And so what happens, the employees become disillusioned, they lose trust. When you lose trust, there's job dissatisfaction. When there's job dissatisfaction, employees leave. And then the fourth concern is union agreements, and that's where your pay systems are generally or largely based on seniority. Now, Table 13.9 is looking at the potential benefits of a skill-based pay system. And here's just some of the benefits. It fits workforce values, increases staffing flexibility, broadens incentives to increase knowledge and skills, reinforces group participation, decreases overall labor costs, greater productivity, and favorable quality outcomes. In competency-based pay systems, we're rewarding our employees based on their knowledge, the skills they possess, and the behaviors that result in positive high-ranking performance. And competency is your trait or characteristic that's required by a job holder to perform that job well. So Figure 13.9 shows you some of the ways in which you can design a competency-based pay. And some of the questions would be, will competencies be narrow or generic? Will the plan define competencies with a bottom-up or top-down approach? Will competencies be based on observable or abstract actions? Will competencies have a marketplace or strategic value? So these help you to design. These questions help you to sit down and flesh out the ideas and to better ascertain how to design your competency-based pay. Now, market-based pay are systems that focus on external rather than internal equity, and they operate without traditional pay ranges. The goal of this is to build employee commitment, and this is accomplished by creating an atmosphere where employees feel that their pay is logical and consistent, right? So it gives you something where they feel more confident because it's something that's going on outside of, it's being based upon something other than the internal equity factors. This is looking at the market as a whole. Now, total rewards includes everything that you receive as an employee that you believe is valuable and it results from that employment relationship. That could be your compensation, your benefits, any work-life balance that's achieved, performance and recognition, development, and career opportunities. Those are your total rewards. That's the big enchilada, the big burrito. Clearly I'm hungry because I just mentioned food. But that is the whole reward package. And looking at all of these factors, an employee is going to either see this as a rewarding job and have a higher job satisfaction, or they're going to see this as a job that has limited rewards and they need to go ahead and pack up their stuff and hightail it out of there. So that is Chapter 13 in a nutshell. If you have any questions, you know how to reach me.